All right. Good evening, Dolphins fans. Welcome to the Final Yard, the 5 Reasons Sports Network's Dolphins postgame show. I'm here with you this evening with the host of the Pulse of Fins Nation, Louis Sung, and we are going to get into everything that we saw and kind of unpack a little bit of this, relatively quiet preseason week 2 game that ended with a disappointing loss for the Dolphins. Jason Sanders missed the potential game-winning field goal there at the end. This show, like many of the others here on the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel, is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy simplified. Here at the 5 Reasons Sports Network, we're proud to be working with Prize Picks again this upcoming NFL season. It's a revolutionary fantasy platform where you pick 2, 3, 4, or even up to 5 different players across different teams and even leagues to go the over or the under on their fantasy point projections. If you predict right, you can win big. Prize Picks routinely offers freebie picks for players to take advantage of to increase their odds of winning. Don't delay. When you sign up, use the promo code 5, spell it out FIVE, and they will match your deposit up to $100. Once again, that's prizepicks.com, and the promo code that you're looking for is FIVE. In our pregame show, we talked about Prize Picks, and we gave you a couple of potential, players to consider. We hit on one of them, okay? We talked about Jason Sanders going over 1.5 field goals made. He did that. We also took a look at Cedric Wilson's fantasy score, but if you played the under for Cedric Wilson, you were good in that regard because he didn't make an appearance. And then the other one, Louis, you were talking about taking the over for Skylar Thompson. Going into the game, Skylar Thompson's over under for passing yards was 165.5, and then the rushing yards 15.5, and the fantasy score of 12. Skylar Thompson did get in the game, and he was very impressive, and he did put up really good numbers, but he didn't quite hit those totals. Louis, how you feeling with that Prize Picks pick, man?
My Prize Picks were awful. In fact, the one that was closest was the one that was the most unlikely to happen. If Skylar Thompson had gotten to play the entire second half like I had hoped he would, I think he would have made that number easy, just based on everything that we saw today. Because let me tell you something right now, David, and for everybody who's watching who's saying Bridgewater needs to go, listen, if they can find a trade partner, that's literally the only way that you can get rid of Bridgewater, okay? Just according to overthecap.com, this is where I go. That's my go-to usually for stuff like this. If you trade Teddy Bridgewater, you get $2 million in dead money and $4.5 million in cap savings. That's the only way you can cut him. That's the only way you can get rid of him. If you try to cut him at this point, then every penny that we did would go out. So we would not gain anything back in savings if you cut. 6.5 million dead, big fat zero in cap savings. So the only way you're getting rid of Teddy Bridgewater in 2022 is if you end up trading him. Now, who would take him at this point? I think most people would be saying, like, no, you can keep Teddy. Well, who's that kid over there? That kid, Skylar Thompson. I want that kid. I want that one. Like, no, you can't have him. Like, at this point, I don't want you got to keep him. He has to be rostered now, David. You cannot run the risk of him hitting waivers, because at this point, if he hits waivers, I guarantee you some team out there who's looking at their backup quarterback situation and they're looking at it like, man, this guy still stinks after all this time. And they're going to look at everything that Skylar Thompson has done tonight in the last week, and they're going to say, I can do something with this guy. In fact, I would even go as far as to say is that if he continues this level of performance, if he continues to be this guy, some team are going to be maybe looking at Skylar Thompson and thinking, I can probably make a Chad Pennington out of you. And I think that could happen. But that's only because I see it in the moment type of situation, obviously.
Right, yeah.
He went 9 for 10, 129 yards, a touchdown. His chemistry with Eric Ezukanma is obvious at this point. And by the way, I'll get into Eric Ezukanma a little bit later. But what Skylar Thompson is doing, like, we were impressed by that one game from Reed Sinnett, which was an amazing game to watch. Don't get me wrong. But Skylar Thompson has done it now 2 weeks in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Again, granted, it's backups.
Sure.
But
Still.
There is some level of execution that has to happen here. You have to have some level of skill to be able to march down the field that easily at any given moment. And the only reason, truthfully, that we had any issues in that last drive was because of those 2 botched snaps.
Yeah.
Like, who was that? Was that Adam Pankey snapping the ball at that point?
I think it might have been Dieter. I know Pankey was there. I'm not 100% sure, but it was ugly. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 botched snaps at the end there, that both of which they had to make up for, and they did. That's the thing. They made up for it twice.
Yep.
And so you realize that, and you look at it, it's like, whoever decided that picking Skylar Thompson, and by the way, Matt Waldman, he's a draft guy on Twitter, right? Yeah, but he's a scout kind of guy. He was the one saying that of all the quarterbacks in this draft, Skylar Thompson might be the best one. Now, I don't know if I go that far.
Yeah, Kenny Pickett looks pretty good so far.
Yeah, I'm not going to go that far as to say Skylar Thompson's the best out of this draft class.
Yeah.
But let me tell you something. He's making it very difficult to argue that case right now, because he doesn't make very many mistakes. He finds, and he's showing QB vision, finding guys in very heavy traffic. Eric Okama was open, but only if you put it right in his breadbasket in between a triangle of Raiders defenders, and he still managed to get it right on target. That is very impressive stuff.
Yeah, listen, as you said, he probably has earned his roster spot, and I say probably, like, I mean, he's basically earned the spot, but they were talking during the broadcast, and we could talk a little bit more about the QBs later, but since we started here, let's just go. They were talking on the broadcast, and they brought up an interesting point about keeping 3 quarterbacks and paying 3 quarterbacks, especially when you don't ever want to see 2 of those quarterbacks get on the field at any point in time or any meaningful point in time during the season, and so Skylar Thompson might very well be pushing another player off this roster. And when you start to wonder who those players might be, I know that the Dolphins have to cut down by 5 before the next preseason game, so before next week.
One cut, Keon Smith.
And then, then there's the normal sort of cuts going into the regular season. But if Thompson is making his case for the 53-man roster, and it seems like he's pushing somebody else off the roster. And, we'll talk about some of these guys that really flashed here today. We saw the starters get some run. Most of the starters get some run early in the game. Obviously, the headline was having Tua Tagovailoa start at quarterback, but there were no appearance from Teron Armstead. There was no Tyreek Hill, no Jalen Waddle. So there were still some major pieces to that offensive puzzle that were missing. And Tua had 2 series, right? And, he looked fine, right? He looked fine. What did you make of Tua's performance today?
I mean, it was good. Nothing spectacular, nothing wow worthy, but also there was nothing that you looked at as like, what the heck are you doing? So again, it was a very simple, very brief appearance, 6 for 8, 58 yards. Mike McDaniel's on the mic right now saying that Tua did exactly what he hoped he did. He executed. He was in command of the huddle, and they looked good. But that's pretty much all you can say about it. He looked good. So, but if that's the best that you can say, then that's the best you can say. There's not really much to talk about. So this is what I'm concerned about, and this comes right back to Skylar Thompson. You know how Twitter works, Dave. You know how it is.
We're going to
have a controversy very soon. There's going to be people out there legitimately and legitimately believing that Skylar Thompson is the best quarterback on this roster. I don't want to imagine what things are going to be like. Look here. Oh, it's already starting. Marcus Hunter says, Skylar Thompson reminds me of Tony Romo. Really? Tony Romo, huh? Oh, boy. Okay, well, first of all, I'm pretty sure Tony Romo's arm is stronger than Thompson's. Yeah? Like, Tony Romo had a cannon, if I remember correctly. So I'm not going to go there with him. As far as, like, I don't want this to start. So I want to nip it in the bud as quickly as we can. Tua Tagovailoa is the starting quarterback for the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
Anybody saying otherwise is wrong. And it would be wise for you to keep everything toned down when it comes to this. Believe me, I was very happy. It was very exciting in the last quarter because of the highlight reel plays that were going on there. But let's not act like it was all Skylar Thompson. In fact, that one of those first deep throws that went to Eric Ezukanma, he bailed Skylar Thompson out.
Oh, big time.
He bailed
Big time.
Skylar Thompson out
Absolutely.
of a big mess. He was that defensive back was in position to pick it off, and Ezukanma reached out his arm, snagged it, and turned it into a massive play that is going to show up on Skylar Thompson's QB rating as something wonderful. Yep. So he owes a lot right now to Eric Ezukanma. And I put this out there on Twitter, David, and maybe you can think of a different comparison. But based on what I've seen from him just in this game alone, Eric Ezukanma reminds me of Jarvis Landry. He reminds me of Jarvis Landry because I see the fire in his belly. I see him fighting for every yard, every inch that he can get. He fights, he pushes, he shoves. He's not afraid to get physical with the defenders. He's got those sticky hands that Jarvis Landry was famous for back when he was here in Miami. And he actually has some speed and some size to him, which Jarvis was missing. So in many ways, Eric Ezukanma is like a bigger, stronger Jarvis Landry. I want to see him continue to be physical. I want to see him keep doing what he's doing here. And think about this also. In many ways, when Jarvis Landry was here in Miami, he was either wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2.
Yeah.
Eric Ezukanma is wide receiver 4 behind Waddle, Tyreek Hill, and Cedric Wilson.
Yeah.
And that's incredible to think about. That's the kind of weaponry we have right now. Eric Ezukanma is wide receiver 4, and I don't even think it's close at this point. So right now we have the only controversy we have, and thank you for the point out, Aro. Jarvis Landry wishes he was as fast as Eric Ezukanma. Yeah, it's a very real point to make. So, but is the comparison that I come up with for Landry is that I see the passion that he plays with on every down. He's not laying down and falling to the ground after he makes the catch. He's pushing and shoving for more yards. He's not giving up. And he almost got away too. That's the crazy thing of all. So it's crazy to think about that Chris Grier was able to scout out these guys. And we got to give him credit where it's due. Again, Chris Grier is a very good scout. He makes some good picks. He's obviously made bad picks. Noah Igbenogany again and again.
We'll
and
get
again,
to you.
and again.
We'll get to you, Noah.
Yeah, we'll get to him. But all of these gems, these hidden gems that he's finding, I didn't know who Eric Ezukanma was when he was in the draft. I'm like, who the heck is this guy? I've never even. Why are we picking more wide receivers? Don't we have 4,000 of them by now? Yeah, and now we have one more, and he's better than the other guys.
Yeah, listen, you're not wrong. I mean, he definitely flashed today. He was incredibly impressive. You know, the 6 catches, he had 9 targets, 114 yards, just some spectacular plays, including that one-handed grab up on the sideline on what was ultimately an underthrown ball. And you're right. He probably has forced his way into the wide receiver rotation at this point. I mean, going into this game, that was one of the questions, right? How was this wide receiver battle going to shake out? Because they're not going to keep everybody, right? And I think the guy that probably lost the most today was maybe Preston Williams. I don't know. He finished with 3 catches, 22 yards.
And what did Lynn Bowden finish with?
But Lynn Bowden, he didn't have a catch. He almost he was targeted once, and they called
and he dropped it.
They called it an incomplete. But Bowden was active in the return game, so I do think that based on what we saw with Bowden last week, plus his sort of versatility, being somebody that he could use in the return game, I think that ultimately makes Bowden maybe a little bit more valuable at this point, although Williams, with his size,
I don't know, man. I really don't know at this point. And here's why. But here's why I think that. Because right now, I think this, based on just tonight's performance, Lynn Bowden was the star between the two of them last week.
Yeah.
This week it was Preston Williams. So now you run into a situation, because let's assume they take 6 wide receivers, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know for sure that either Trent Sherfield or River Craycraft is going to end up making this roster. One or the other. I don't know who it is going to be. Mohamed Sanu, I thought he looked good last week, was invisible this week. It's very difficult to say which one of these 49ers alums are going to make it. I think it's going to be either Sherfield or Craycraft. I'm going to lean towards, because it's week to week. Remember, Sherfield was the guy last week, and now it's Craycraft this week. It's like everybody who played last week and did really good disappeared to make room for the other guy. So now it's neck and neck. Next week is probably going to be the deciding factor for a lot of guys' careers as Miami Dolphins. Right now, if I had to say that Preston Williams was dead in the water, I can't say that right now because Preston Williams, again, he brings something to the table in that extra size that guys like Lynn Bowden, his thing was versatility and speed, but we already have that 2 times over. With
but you can never have enough of it.
True, but the thing is that you can't put everybody on the field at once.
Do you make anything of the fact that Williams really didn't get any sort of meaningful run until late in the fourth quarter?
Neither did Lynn Bowden.
No, but he was returning kicks throughout the game.
So was Lynn Bowden. So was Preston Williams, though.
No, but I think Bowden was handling both kickoffs and punts at least through the first half.
You know why that doesn't mean anything to me, David? Right now, you know why that doesn't mean anything to me?
Why?
Because when the regular season starts, we know darn well it's not going to be either one of those guys returning kicks and punts. It's going to be either Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, or probably someone like Raheem Mostert. It's not going to be those guys. Lynn Bowden is not going to be the main kick returner when the season starts. Preston Williams is not going to be the main kick returner when the season starts. It's going to be one of those 3 guys because they can do things that neither Bowden or Williams can do. Yeah. They could be that evasive guy. And by the way, they're also faster than those guys.
Right.
So that's why it doesn't mean anything to me who's the kick returner and who's the punt returner in the preseason, because I know darn well it's not going to be either of those guys when the season starts. So what's the point at that to make that comparison? That's my issue.
And with a guy like Braylon Sanders, obviously undrafted free agent, he flashed at moments today as well. You know, he did pretty well. He
dropped a couple passes though.
Yeah,
he could have brought those in.
3 catches, 40 yards. He had those 5 targets. That touchdown, if he would have hauled in that touchdown, I think that would have made a much better.
Oh no, that would have done huge.
But I mean, he's probably definitely the odd man out at this point, right? I mean, him and Sanu, probably. I mean, maybe Sanders.
But Braylon Sanders will, if he doesn't. See, that's the problem.
Squad?
I want to, but at the same time, I'm looking at this whole thing and I'm like, there's going to be a wide receiver needy team who's going to say, why would I try to trade for a guy you already have when I know you're going to cut somebody that I can work with?
Yeah.
So someone like Chicago, for instance, who are hurting for wide receivers, they're going to look at Braylon Sanders and be like, hey, you, come here. Like, they just cut you, we'll take you. Yeah. So that's the scary thing of it all, right? Is that when you let a guy go to waivers, you're running the risk that they're never going to come back. And that's kind of scary because when you see this homegrown talent that we've managed to spot and bring in, you kind of don't want to let them go.
Right. So
now you run into the situation. If you have Tyreek, Jalen, you have Cedric Wilson, Eric Nzunkanma is 4, Craycraft / Sherfield is 5. You can only keep one more. Or at the very least, we assume that they're only going to keep one more because they're probably going to keep a fullback and probably like 3 tight ends.
Yeah.
And Gesicki will be one of them, and we'll get into Gesicki shortly.
Yeah.
But at that point,
there's a good point here. I mean, they might be able to flip one of these wide receivers for some cornerback help, maybe.
I know that Hussam in our 5 Reasons Sports group chat, and I think he said it in the pregame. I think he also said in the pregame show too that there was a guy he was looking at. I can't remember the guy's name. Someone with the Rams.
Somebody with the Rams. Yeah. Yeah. He mentioned,
But at that point, what do the Rams need anything other than draft picks? And even if they did, will they even keep the draft pick?
Right.
They don't. It's obvious the Rams only use draft picks as trade fodder at this point.
Yeah.
So, but do they need wide receivers? Like they had Odell Beckham Jr. just sitting out there on an island still, and they're not interested in bringing him back. I don't think at this point.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. That's for sure. I mean, we're talking about the wide receivers at this point. I mean, they've got about 10, I think, on the depth chart at the moment. Probably shakes down to 6 by the time we roll around to the regular season. We've already talked about Tua and how his performance was just fine. And, we were singing the praises of Skylar Thompson. But the other quarterback, we should probably mention him too. Teddy Bridgewater played a lot more than I think anybody expected.
More than I expected. Doggone Prize Picks.
Certainly with your Prize Picks selection. But he went 10 for 20, 119 yards, had that ugly safety to sort of start the night. I think what you might have been the one that said this on Twitter, that Skylar Thompson may have limited Bridgewater's Dolphins career to one season, that Thompson might very well be QB2 by the time we get to this point a year from now. What'd you make of Teddy Bridgewater's performance today?
Nah. Just nah. I'm like about as much as I ever expect from a backup quarterback. Because that's what makes Skylar Thompson look so much more impressive. If anything, what Teddy Bridgewater did tonight is what makes Skylar Thompson look so impressive in comparison. Because Teddy Bridgewater, he did some veteran things. He kind of was able to move around the pocket a little bit. But yeah, that awful safety right from the get-go. Why were you hanging on to the ball so long? If you knew you're going to have to get rid of it, why were you waiting until you were halfway down to the ground before you threw the ball that away? That's the thing about it. Like that's almost an inexcusable. If Tua had done that, let's say, if Tua had done that, we would
Twitter would have been on fire.
Ballistic.
Ballistic
about it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think about. But because it was Teddy Bridgewater, we're just like, it was preseason, not a big deal. Who cares? Because it's Teddy Bridgewater. It's not the starting quarterback. We know he's not the starting quarterback. He's not. And at this point, I don't believe he's good enough to be the starting quarterback. He might start for somebody somewhere down the line, but only in the case of there's no one else around. He's good. Don't get me wrong. He's a good veteran quarterback. But if between the two of them, the more impressive guy is the guy who's the rookie.
Right. Thompson. Yeah. Now listen. Let's talk a little bit more about that safety, because an abject failure of a play, obviously. And Bridgewater had a huge part in that play, holding on to the ball for way too long. The minute you saw that kind of pressure, you had to get rid of that football. But he wasn't the only one to mess up on that play. Mike Gesicki fanned on a block in that play that ultimately led to that direct pressure on Teddy Bridgewater. Gesicki's night was an interesting one because, going into the evening, we assumed maybe wrongly at this point that Gesicki was tight end 1, right? And he played with the ones last week. He was only in there for, maybe one drive, and then he was out of the ball game. Tonight, Gesicki played into the third quarter. He might have been the only sort of regular starter to get that kind of run, and he didn't look great. I mean, he finished with 3 catches on 6 targets, 27 yards. In one of the drives, I think it might have been the first drive with Tua. Tua hit him right in the chest.
And he wasn't looking.
He didn't get his head around fast enough. Now, looking back on that play, he might have been held on that play, so that might have had a factor in his sort of late movement to the ball. But regardless, that was obviously an opportunity that could have been a first down. A little bit later, there was another drop after a big hit, mind you, right? But still, playing into the third quarter, didn't look particularly effective in his pass protection. What did you make of Gesicki's performance? And more specifically, what did you make of the fact that he played deep into the third quarter of this ballgame?
I make it that it's the same situation that I expected in the pregame and what we kind of all saw coming. Mike Gesicki, and I tweeted it out just like this. Mike Gesicki is a weapon. He is a sword. He is a spear. He is somebody who can create mismatches and be a nightmare for linebackers in coverage if he so desires. This offense doesn't need another spear. It doesn't need another sword. It needs a shield, and he's not a shield. All the way back in his career in Penn State, the one knock on Mike Gesicki's entire game was he cannot block. He doesn't even and back in college, it seemed like he wasn't even trying to block. Now he's trying, but it's still the same result because he's not good at it. And it's the same thing that I said about the Jimmy Graham comparison. He can train and practice all he wants. Some guys are just good at some things, and some guys are good at other things. Gesicki is not a blocker. He is not the guy who you're going to rely on when you have a linebacker coming at you on the blitz. He's probably going to miss because that's not his game. His game is to go in the seam, be that big target, make a leaping catch, and that's some of the stuff that he did tonight late in the third quarter. He started doing the things that we expect of a Mike Gesicki. He was a weapon. As soon as you put him out running routes, he's dangerous. You have him in line as a blocker, you're done. And everybody knows it. Yeah. Including the defense. They're looking at Mike Gesicki and being like, you serious? Where are you go? Why aren't you moving? Where are you going? You're not going anywhere. And then they run him over because that's not what he's good at. And so now you run into the situation. It looks weird because your presumed starting tight end is in the third quarter of a preseason game, which, is the dress rehearsal, but the rest of the starters got booted out a long time ago. Yeah. And the reason is because they're trying to get him reps in this scheme to try and hope that maybe, just maybe, something will awaken in him and he'll be like, okay, I can do this whole blocking thing now. And I don't see it happening. If you're gonna put Mike Gesicki out there, he needs to be running routes. That's the end of the discussion. It's the end of the discussion. If he is not running routes, Mike Gesicki is a liability. He is.
Yeah, and listen, this offense, the Mike McDaniel, Kyle Shanahan offense it's tough on tight ends and expects quite a bit of its tight ends, but at this point, it
requires blockers.
Right, when you're looking at it, Durham Smythe might very well have assumed Gesicki's tight end one role. And, does Gesicki become more of a sort of gadget player at that point, like in specific packages and things like that? I mean, it's definitely something to monitor as we move into week 3, what kind of usage he gets, and then obviously as we progress through the season. He's playing this year on the franchise tag, which kind of limits, I think, the possible trade return for him. If he ends up signing elsewhere, there's possible, it's possible the Dolphins get a compensatory draft pick, but again, a lot of that stuff's kind of up in the air at this point because it doesn't seem like Gesicki is a fit with this offensive scheme, at least not at this point anyway. Now, when you look at what's going on with this offense, they're obviously they haven't played with big pieces, right? Tyreek Hill hasn't made an appearance. Jalen Waddle hasn't made an appearance. Teron Armstead will change everything along that offensive line, hopefully. So maybe that factors into what's going on here. Obviously, that's not going to change his effectiveness as a blocker. That's something that he and the coaches are going to have to address. But it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. With the offense though, and we're going to move over to the defense here in a minute, but with the offense, the McDaniel offense is predicated around being able to run the football. And during the broadcast, they interviewed Teron Armstead, and he was talking very specifically about being able to run the football. And he talked about how it's a brand new system, a brand new scheme, lots of explosive plays built into this offense. The running game is the basis of everything we plan to do. We can't create the explosive plays without it. Well, when you look at the running game at this point in time, it's largely absent. In the first half, they had 8 carries for 4 yards. That's less than a yard per carry. What do you make of what's going on with the running backs? Is it just because they don't have, everybody there, or is there a little bit more that we should start to worry about? I think you're on mute, bud.
Oh, I am on mute. Sorry about that. I was just looking through some of the quotes that were coming out. Tua was on the mic just now, and basically he's confirming that all of that run game stuff and all of the plays that have been being called, they're very, very basic. in nature. Like the true nature of the running game has not yet been established. Like a lot of those outside zone runs and stuff like that, they're not being used yet. They're not even like being installed. This is all just basic, boring, bland, blah stuff that you don't expect, that you're not going to get much excitement out of. Right. So again, the reason I'm not panicking about the offense yet is because I know for a fact that, especially on offense, you try to hide the best of what you have. Every offense, every team does this. So when you see a defense getting whipped by a vanilla offense, okay, yeah, there's some cause for concern there. And we all know, and we're about to get into the defense now, and I'll express what my concerns are at that moment. But knowing that we were able to get some stuff done, and it was just off of just execution. Again, Eric Ezukanma, Skylar Thompson, and let's not act like Chase Edmonds didn't look pretty good when he was out there.
He did. He looks like a legitimate weapon.
He looks good. He looks good. He was able to break a few tackles. He showed some shiftiness. So let's not act like, oh, it was a complete disaster with the running backs. It was not. But as far as the actual running game, yeah, it's going to make some differences. And there's an excellent point by Renegade. Once you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Teron Armstead out there, the whole offense changes, because now knowing that you have those two guys out there, because let's be real about something, as good as Eric Ezukanma is proving to be, and as good as Cedric Wilson can be, there's a reason they're only wide receivers 3 and 4. Tyreek and Jalen Waddle make this offense tick, because when those guys are out there, you have to put extra emphasis on keeping those two guys contained. Tyreek did not play. It was a last-minute scratch. I was kind of bummed because I was really looking forward to seeing him make a fool out of the other team's defense. But whatever, it is what it is. I'll live with it. That being said, you can tell that that's going to be a difference now, because once Tyreek and Jalen Waddle get in there, you're going to have the teams are going to be like double teaming. Okay, do we double team Tyreek or do we double team Jalen Waddle? Obviously, it's not a very good idea for them to do both, because wide receiver 3, or maybe Mike Gesicki, who might be actually running a route, which would be his best option, he might be wide open. Or you can catch Chase Edmonds or Raheem Mostert in the flat, and then they can take off running like a shot. So the run game, yes, it's a very important part of it, but when you have those two guys missing, the defense is not as scared as they will be once they are out there, because now you can't just stuff the box and say, okay, here comes the run. Because if you do that at any given moment, either Waddle or Hill could catch a pass and they could be gone, and you would have no shot at catching them. So they have to play back. They have to be a little more careful about the decisions they make, and they will be forced not to do, like, sell out for the run. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers last week, Dolphins couldn't run the ball, but they sold out for the run. They basically shoved everybody in this little hole right here and said, I dare you to get past this. And the only way they were able to do that was by throwing it, because that was what they gave. That was what they were willing to give. They said, you're Mr. Run Game Master, right? Beat us by passing it. Okay, so he did. Good on Skylar Thompson again. So I don't expect the running game to function when the best assets of the offense are out still, because we're playing it safe with them. And I get it. I understand. It's preseason. No use in letting them out. And since the injuries to the corners happened, which we'll get into now, I understand the logic. But the reason I'm not worried about the run game just yet is because the best parts of what make the offense tick have not been installed yet. Tyreek is not there. Jalen Waddle's not there. Teron Armstead is not there. Those are the 3 guys that we went out of our way to make sure that they're going to be the core of the offense. And if they're not there, well, you have the big fancy car with no engine. Right. What do you expect?
And listen, Tua said this during his availability: we are all a little rusty, but it's nothing that a little film can't fix. So, it'll be interesting to see if they do decide to have Hill and Waddle make an appearance next week. Armstead, I'd love to see him. At this point, not only do I want to see Armstead, although that's probably not going to happen until week 1, I'd love to get a peek at Greg Little to see if he could do anything at that tackle position. But, we've talked a lot about the offense. Let's shift over to the defense. Ultimately, the Dolphins lost this one 15-13. They gave up that touchdown on that opening drive. Noah Igbenogany looked like,
Like he doesn't belong in an NFL uniform.
Yeah, his former Auburn teammate Jarrett Stidham looked like he was kind of picking on him a little bit there in that first drive, and then after that, but we talked about the cornerbacks in the pregame. We got to see a little bit of Mackenzie Alexander today. He had his moments. Keon Crossan looked pretty good. But who stood out to you from the defensive side of the ball tonight?
Ben Stille.
Yeah.
He was a beast on the defensive line. So he got a sack, hit the quarterback a couple times. You have it up right there. He was a force. And in many ways, he could be a very Zach Sealer-ish type of guy. Speaking of which, of the starters, guess who was dominant once again?
Zach Sealer. Yeah.
He's great. Like that guy. It still baffles me, man, that he was limited in how many snaps he got last season. And as much as I think Adam Butler is a good player, I'm thinking to myself, why are you not keeping Zach Sealer on the bench?
Yeah.
That's wild. That's crazy. Like this dude is a beast, and he proved it again. Like he is crazy powerful.
Yeah.
If I were the Dolphins, I would lock him up now along with Christian Wilkins.
That defensive line looks good. I mean, when we're talking about a guy, Ben Stille, who's going to be like, a spot player during the regular season, but he's going to add depth. They found Zach Sealer, and maybe they found somebody similar again in Ben Stille. But Jalen Phillips looked good in his run. And then obviously once we get to see Wilkins and Agba and like the whole group together, that defensive line is going to be no joke. Did any of the line? A bunch of linebackers. I mean, I know Phillips is technically a linebacker, but a bunch of linebackers are kind of jostling for position on this team. We saw some good plays today from Channing Tindall. We saw some good plays from Cameron Good, both rookies. Did anybody else, maybe from the linebacker group, stand out to you?
From the linebacker group, Jalen Phillips continues to be a force. The guy is going to be a star this year. I really believe that. As far as other guys who made an appearance, we got Duke Riley make an appearance. Just trying to think about Porter Gustin. Again, awesome work. The dude has something there. I think he can really be good. Channing Tindall in coverage. Okay, not too bad. So I think he's going to be something good. But the question now becomes, like the saying goes, and in many ways it comes back to Skylar Thompson a little bit, is whose roster spot gets usurped? Because you can't keep everybody. Who are you going to let go of in order to be able to keep the guys you need? Because right now in the linebacker core, you kind of have an idea of who you're going to have, right? Jerome Baker, that's an obvious one. Sam Eguavoen, probably going to stick around. Special teams, backup sort of a guy.
Yeah.
Melvin Ingram, obviously he's a pass rusher guy. Yeah. Calvin Munson will probably stick around as the backup specifically to a Landon Roberts. Jalen Phillips, Brennan Scarlett, Duke Riley. That's how many linebackers now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7, 8. That's for Baker and Eguavoen. Where do you find room for guys like Porter Gustin? Where do you find room for guys like Channing Tindall? It's very difficult to find a space for everyone. So you're going to have to make some difficult decisions here. So you obviously don't want to cut Channing Tindall because I would be
surprised if that happened. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Because he was the first pick of the draft for the Dolphins. You're obviously not going to just cut him and then try to stash him on the squad. That'd be ridiculous. Yeah. So do you cut Sam Eguavoen? Because coverage is kind of his deal. He's not necessarily a run stuffing linebacker. I mean, he can find holes every once in a while and make some plays, but isn't that what Channing Tindall is supposed to be able to do? Yeah. And that's the hard part. Brennan Scarlett. Do you get rid of Scarlett? He's a pretty good pass rusher to some extent. Like, do you dump Duke Riley? Like, a lot of these linebackers, like, we keep talking about how the linebackers are not that great, and yet we have a lot of really talented players who are right now, they're fighting for their football lives, and you can't keep everybody.
And it'll be interesting to see how many that they ultimately keep. I know that, we've mentioned Phillips and stuff like that. The outside linebackers, the edge rushers, they're probably in a category unto themselves, because the Dolphins, they'll tend to play, two linebackers at times, right? So you can't carry 8 of those guys. I know a lot of will end up on special teams and contributing in other ways, but they're going to end up using a ton of defensive backs as well. And when you start talking about that roster crunch that you're getting to, it starts to push guys off the roster, right? So if Skylar Thompson has made this football team, somebody else has to go, right? And so now if we start looking at the defensive backs, safety looks pretty set for the most part. Elijah Campbell has flashed at times. Maybe he can stick around, but when we're looking at the corners, did any of these younger guys that played today, because Igbenogany has not, taken the reins, even though, the roster spot has almost been gifted at this point, considering the injuries that are happening around him. Did any of these other guys stand out to you today? Guys like Kader Kohu or Keon Crossan, or, there's, a half dozen guys maybe kind of jostling for that last position. Did any of those guys catch your attention today?
Yeah, Keon Crossan looked pretty good. Kader Kohu looked awesome as well, because quite frankly, right now, given the circumstances, Miami's in trouble. Let's be real about something. The depth is in trouble. If Byron Jones is not ready to go week 1, Miami is in trouble, because Nick Needham, we're still hoping that the injury is not as bad as it looked. He looked like he was in real pain. I'm hoping that it was just a dislocated finger. I know that one of our guys in the chat was saying it looks like it might have been broken. I'm hoping that's not the case, because I would think that they would be more delicate with a broken finger if that were the case.
Yeah.
But neither way, I don't think Nick Needham will go week 1. Which leaves you with a problem, because you cannot trust Mackenzie Alexander on the boundary with Xavier Howard, which is ironic, because Mackenzie Alexander, if I'm not mistaken, was actually the next cornerback taken right after Xavier Howard. Oh, the irony. Like, some people were saying, why did we take Xavier Howard instead of Mackenzie Alexander? Crazy how that works out. I see folks in the chat saying that it's a broken finger. I don't know if there's any official word on that. I'm just going to try to look it up here, see if I can find some information.
But, listen, you're right. If Needham is down, this group is in a spot, because if
let's also I'm gonna sorry to cut you off, but I just looked it up right now. So 2 hours ago, Adam Beasley tweeted out that there's good news. Nick Needham is on the sideline, was spotted on the sidelines after his injury, and he didn't have a wrap or a cast on his hand. So maybe it was not nearly as bad as we thought it was. Because because the way I look at it is this: if you broke your finger, there is no way you come back out of that sideline, out of that locker room, without something on your hand. Right. Like, there's got to be something to protect that hand, keep it from moving, or something along those lines. If his hand is just out there and it's like floating in the wind, I'm thinking that maybe it was just like, maybe it's a bad jam for all we know. Who knows? Because when you've jammed your finger before, right?
Of course.
When somebody jams your finger, it hurts. Like,
oh yeah. It's obviously the Dolphins are in a spot there, especially if it is a serious injury, and hopefully it's not, because that's 2 of your top 3 corners that there are big question marks now heading into week 1. We're all assuming that Xavier Howard will be in his spot, and then Jones, they're expecting him to play week 1. They're hoping he's going to play week 1, but again, he hasn't been cleared at this point yet. And then obviously we saw Needham go down today. We saw Trill Williams lost for the season last week.
So it'll be interesting.
Down. Right. But I think he ended up coming back into the game.
Oh, did he come back? I didn't catch that.
I think he did. But it'll be interesting to see how it ultimately plays out. One or more of those guys that we've been talking about. So, Kader Kohu, Keon Crossan, some of the other guys, D'Angelo Ross, Elijah Hamilton.
I'm not rolling with Ross. I'm sorry.
Right.
He got burned Igbenogany style last week. I'm not having it. Sorry.
At least one, if not 2 of those guys probably need to be on the roster at this point. I know Crossan has value as a special teamer, so he's probably on the roster one way or the other. But Kohu is somebody that they've really liked through camp. He didn't play last week due to injury, but he looked pretty good here today. Hopefully, you were assuming that he's going to get some run next week. Hopefully he can solidify his roster spot, because he's a guy that, maybe if they would have held him out, they kind of hide him in the practice squad. But now that he's been on the field and he looked pretty good, maybe another team would poach him at that point. But how it all plays out with the corners, I mean, that's a tough one, because I know that we were talking, I think it was Hussam who mentioned it in the pregame that, in a pinch, you could bring Eric Rowe down to play.
That's what he was before he was transitioned to safety.
Right. And that Javon Holland could probably do it too, although Javon Holland is such a ball hawk in the back at this point. I mean, just let him be him as a safety.
Yeah, he single-handedly broke Twitter with all those interceptions.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see how it ultimately plays out. I mean, moving into next week, we'd probably want to start wrapping this up, but moving into next week, the Dolphins have one more preseason game. It's against the Eagles, right?
Yes.
And the Eagles are coming down here for some joint practices next week. So, it'll be interesting to see how all of that plays out. I know in Tampa, they were doing a lot of like the ones going against the ones in practice. Do they do something similar this week? And if that's the case, does that mean we're not going to see many of those guys next weekend when they play? But obviously before that game, the Dolphins have a 5-man cut down that they have to complete. So 5 guys will be off the roster. And then after that, obviously they're going to sort of settle the roster, heading into the regular season. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. Louis, you've got your Pulse of Fins Nation show on Tuesday night, right?
Yes.
Tell everybody what's going on, what you guys have on tap, pitch the show to everybody.
So the way that Pulse of Fins Nation works is that basically it's a show about the fans and the thoughts that are brought from the fans. Anybody who wants to be guaranteed a feature can either throw in a super chat live during the show's runtime, or they can leave a comment in the comment box on the actual YouTube video. So that's how I go ahead and I base the hierarchy, so to speak, of comments. Otherwise, you can always just send out a tweet. And when I send out, because every week I'll pose a question. I'll ask, what are your thoughts? Give me whatever thoughts you have. And if you want to make sure that you're on the show, all you got to do is just give me a shout out. Like, these are my thoughts. I think so and so and so. And Ron and I, my co-host, will be able to talk about it, and we'll get into a nice long debate about it if we do not agree. For instance, he did not necessarily want to see Tua out there playing today, and I disagreed with him, and luckily, the results of which did nothing bad happen to Tua, which is a good thing. The only real danger, as far as injuries concerned, went with the corners. So again, hopefully Needham is all right. Hopefully he's fine. I can't imagine they would have just filled him up with painkillers if they didn't intend for him to go out on the field again, because there's really no point in doing that. Like, no, if you were, let me put it this way, David. Any trainer that deems it fit to just say, take 3 Advil and call me in the morning without actually doing something to protect that hand should be fired immediately and jailed for malpractice. That's my honest opinion.
That's right.
So listen, I really don't. If he didn't get his hand wrapped, I think he's fine.
Yeah. So listen, viewers, make sure that you're checking into Lewis's show, Pulse of Fins Nation, Tuesday at 7 p.m. here on the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel. You'll see Lewis with his co-host Ron. We'll have another pregame show for you ahead of next Saturday's preseason finale, probably at 5 o'clock like we went today. So make sure that you're subscribed to the network, that you throw those notifications on, because not only are you getting all of this great Dolphins content, there's obviously Heat content, Marlins content, Canes content. Make sure you're checking out the 6 Rings Kane show. We've even got stuff
fantasy
on F1.
And there's also fantasy content.
Oh, and a ton of fantasy content. And our fantasy partner here at the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube network is Prize Picks. And you're using promo code 5 FIVE to get your deposit match over there when you sign up for a new account over at Prize Picks. I think that's all we got here for tonight, man. I mean, it was it's pretty low key night. I mean, it was nice to see Tua out there. Obviously, had some fun moments watching Eric Ezukanma and Skylar Thompson. Hopefully next week you'll get that prize picks over or under. You'll make that pick correct.
Listen, man, if I don't get if I don't win on Skylar Thompson 3 weeks in a row, like I'm gonna be so mad. Like I really believe that he's gonna play. Because Tua wants to, he literally said in the press conference, Tua wants to play against the Eagles. And I'm just like, no, you had your preseason time. Go sit on the bench, boy. It's like, you're done. Thank you.
Well, we'll be back and we'll walk everybody through all of those prize picks over-unders for the Dolphins next week in our pregame show, Yard Prep. But anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. For Lewis, my name is David. We will see you next week. Go Dolphins.